we recorded backwards. Hey, thank you for joining the Escape With Me book club. Escape with me, Sam Reiner.
And me, Caitlin.
Into our most recent read. Come with us as we evade reality and go into detail about a new book. We'll be covering the book from beginning to end, so there will be spoilers. Today we're going to England and Wonderland. You know, England.
Yes.
Okay, actually, going back to that, I love that it's England because the people misheard her. Because she only says England when she's in Wonderland. In England, she says England.
England, yeah, I had wondered about that because doing the audiobook, I didn't understand the difference, so I thought maybe just the reader was saying England super weird.
Yeah, no, it's England. And I like that because Wonderland is Alice mishearing what it's called because it's actually Underland.
Oh, yes, I didn't know that.
But she heard Wonderland. And so she goes to the other place and it's England, but they heard England. And I just love it.
Good little misnomer.
Just gonna put that right here. I love it. Published September 1st, 2020. Oh, that should have been the April Fool's one. But Unbirthday is the 10th installment in the Disney Twisted Tales series. 11 years later, Alice is once again confronted with Wonderland, but this time in the midst of a bloody war. The Queen of Hearts has decided she needs all the toys, and despite all the nonsense, Alice finds that Wonderland might reflect the real world more than she first thought. But can she save one world, let alone both? So background, I love myself some good nonsense. I grew up reading the Wizard of Oz series books, so that's what fantasy is to me. Just craziness, everything weird and happening, and monsters being able to throw their own head, and just super creative stuff. And so I really like Alice in Wonderland because it follows that kind of, use it with a capital N, nonsense vibes.
Yeah.
Where anything could happen anywhere, because that's the fun of fantasy to me, is it could be literally anything.
Yeah, I do agree that can be the point of fantasy. I struggle with this kind of fantasy, though, because I still want my fantasy to make a little bit of sense. So especially in this book, what I learned in reading through, I didn't like it as much as I probably could have if I was okay with the nonsense and the lack of rules.
Yeah, I feel like I'm on this side of things, but you're kind of like Tolkien.
Yes, 100%.
The structure. Lord of the Rings is so structured, you could learn the languages he invented.
Mm-hmm.
Granted, he has a background as a linguist, so not terribly surprised. But you could not do that with this. Like, I don't even think you could make a map of Wonderland if you wanted to.
No, and that's kind of the point of it, is that it's kind of constantly fluctuating and changing. But I am a very logical type A person, so I like to be able to follow it. And so I had a hard time reading it where I was just like, you're right, this is allowed in the book. This can happen, but I don't understand why. And so I don't like it that much.
So age level, we have young adult.
Yeah.
Content warning, relatively short for Liz, but
pretty intense still.
Fair. The things that are on here are absolutely on here. So xenophobia, blood, torture, anti-Semitism, racism, language, PG-13, graphic violence, and parasites.
Like you said, they're on here and they're on there for a reason.
I put parasites on here. I don't normally, granted, I don't really read that many books that would need a parasite trigger warning, but when she gets injured on her leg and they're like, oh yeah, we almost got out all the spirits and whatever. And Alice is like, no, Wonderland. It's about germs and bacteria, not about spirits. And then something comes out of her wound.
Yeah.
I wanted to throw up.
Yeah, it was pretty gross.
If I want to throw up about this, I'm sure other people are gonna not have a fun day. So that's why that one's on there. But to judge your book by its cover, it's interesting that we've gone back to the villain. Granted, I feel like the Queen of Hearts has a more obvious silhouette than Alice does. So that's definitely something, but we've had a whole run with the hero being on the cover.
Yes. And this, I think, our first bringing back to it.
Yeah. The first two were definitely the villain. The third was the Beast, which is the villain up to a point.
Yeah, debatable.
And so I feel like the first time the hero was on the cover, for sure, was Milan.
Yep.
And then we went back to the villain, and then we got Conceal Don't Feel, and then Wendy, which was the hero. And then we're back to villains for 2.
Well, and we can't even say that it's a Liz thing.
No, it's totally random.
Because Straight On Till Morning had Wendy on it.
Yeah, and Jen Anita's first 2 books. The first book had the villain, the second had the heroes.
But still, overall, a really good cover.
Oh, no, it's great. It's one of those covers where you look at it before you read it and you're like, okay, this is what Alice in Wonderland. And then you read the book and you look back at the cover and you're like, okay, I see you. It's got tea and the cards of the watch, but the camera in the bottom left next to the Queen of Hearts wand, I would not have got that was a camera.
No, me neither.
Until I read this book and I was like, oh, that's a camera. I didn't know what that was.
Well, because I thought it looked like the door, like the doorknob from the original movie.
Oh.
That's what I thought it was at first. But no, it's a camera. You're right, which is a lot more appropriate.
Yeah. And you have the Cheshire Cat at the bottom, which feels more appropriate after I've read the book. But it looks really good. It has not a huge amount of colors, but the colors it has, they use really well. That's how I feel about most of the rest. Because for a while we were getting more colors on the cover. I think Snow White was peak amount of colors, and then we've kind of gone back to making them more limited in their colors, but using them more wisely. So it looks good to me.
Yeah, I like it overall. It's a nice one.
But yeah, what else is there to ever say about these books? It's Alice in Wonderland.
It is that.
I did think, looking at it, oh, I guess the Queen of Hearts is a real villain this time, and not just her extra self.
Barely brought up at all.
I mean, she is, but what she's doing is actually very villainous versus the other one where she was just kind of throwing a temper tantrum, I feel like, in the movie. She is the villain, but...
That is fair. She actually has a plot line and something she wants to do, a goal.
In the books, she's reigned in by the King of Hearts. No clue what happened to him in this book.
They say it, that he died, or disposed of, I guess. Because she asked that. Alice relied on his ability.
She's like, hey, where's the King of Hearts? And then they just get quiet. So not 100% sure what that means. But point is, he's definitely not here anymore.
No, he is not available. And we find that a lot. The things that she relied on the first time, she thought she could rely on the second time, and then cannot.
100%. So I feel like this is the book she was trying to write with Straight On Till Morning. There's so many parallels with this book.
For sure.
We've got the female older main character going to this land of insanity. Wendy for the first time, Alice for the second. And it's a mirror storyline about how she thinks she needs to save Wonderland, but actually she really needs to save the real world because they reflect each other. And also feminism and voting rights. But this one's better.
Yes, much better.
So this is the first time ever I've thought, what if Liz had more pages? Because that was the thing we had issues with when Straight On to Morning, is she had these really cool ideas, but then she had to drop them. I mean, didn't have to. She did drop them and kept going.
Ideas were obviously dropped, yeah.
Yeah, and I wonder if she had 200 more pages, how she would have played that out. Because I can think of maybe 1 or 2 drop subplots, but for the most part, everything is pretty solid in this book.
Yeah, agreed.
So this just feels like the book she was trying to write last time, but got the actual opportunity to do this time, which, more power to her. She released 2 books in 2020. Well, I mean, Disney, but you know her.
I know. But is this her longest book? Because you actually have the page numbers.
Yes.
So this is her actual longest book.
This is over 500 pages.
Woo, good night.
And the last book we read was 300 something. And so I actually wonder if she had more pages, how the last one would have turned out. Because Alice and Wendy would get along, very much so.
Oh, they would be besties for sure.
Because I think Straight On to Morning happens a little bit before Unbirthday, because Wendy becomes an active suffragette in the ending of the last one, and when Alice is with her sister, or even with her, maybe her aunt, she's like, oh, well, if women get the vote, which makes me think there have been a lot of suffragette movements and things. So Wendy's probably like Alice's sister's age at this point, but I still think they'd get get along.
Oh, for sure. They would have a good time together, going to rallies and stuff.
100%.
But, and spoilers for the end, Alice ends up with somebody. I don't think we were ever told that Wendy does end up with somebody.
No.
I think she stays alone her whole life.
At least until they get the vote.
Fair, yeah.
For all we know.
She has a purpose.
But the book starts off with a mercury warning.
Yes, it was so great. I thought this was the perfect way to set up this novel. It completely took me aback. I decided to start reading this on a walk one day with my dog. And I'm like, okay, let's get into that Alice in Wonderland fantasy. And then it's, hey, don't drink mercury.
Yeah, and it was weird because it started with a historical content. And it's always like, okay, so the reason the Mad Hatter is the Mad Hatter is because hatters used mercury in their hat making process. And so essentially they were poisoning themselves over years, mercury poisoning slowly. So they would eventually go mad because of the mercury poison. And she mentions, hey, one of the characters drinks mercury. Don't drink mercury. Is bad.
Do not do it.
Which was hilarious when we got to the moment where the Wonderland Hatter drinks mercury, because I thought it would be the real world one or something.
Same.
It just was so serious about this warning. It was like, oh my goodness, what in the world is going to happen?
Or I figured he would be doing constantly or something like that, but no.
No, because when it comes up in the text, Alice was like, that's poison. And the Hatter's like, yes. Yes, it is.
That's the point.
That's the point.
It'll help me get back to my nonsensical self. I'm too logical.
He basically is like, yes, and you guys also use poison. And he uses the example of cyanide in some of the makeup.
And arsenic, yeah.
Which Alice is like, well, I don't do that. But yes, that is absolutely a thing. And I feel like he could have pointed out so many things. There's a guy on TikTok that talks about all the deadly things that these Victorian houses just had laying around, like lead paint.
Yeah.
There's one poison in this beautiful color, either blue or green. I think it's green. And it's just all poison. So much poison just everywhere. So it's this whole thing where she's like, that's poison. And he's like, yep, it is. And he drinks it. And so I thought it was overkill. But given who this is directed at,
yep,
I remember the Tide Pod challenge.
Yep, 100%.
So I'm not surprised Disney was like, do it again in the beginning.
Yeah, make sure we cannot be sued
for this. We do not want to encourage some edgelord kid who loves the Hatter to drink mercury.
Yeah, because listen, the Mad Hatter nonsense got really popular back when the Alice in Wonderland remakes were coming out, and people were taking it real seriously.
Even today, me with another co-star, we did another urban fantasy with Alice in Wonderland, but it's a modern version. The Mad Hatter is one of the love interests. And then, of course, the other popular one is Cheshire Cat, which apparently the other author, L.L. McKinney, liked the Mad Hatter, but this author, Liz Braswell, liked the Cheshire Cat.
Yeah, that's so wild. I did not know that other things had been written with those being the love interests. That's wild.
Oh yeah, those are the two popular love interests. I don't think I have yet to read an Alice in Wonderland adaptation that has her with the White Rabbit. I'm not saying it's not out there. It's the Mad Hatter or the Cheshire Cat every time.
The more you know.
The less you need to.
Anyway, don't drink mercury, folks. That was the beginning of the book.
Yeah, don't drink mercury. Anyway.
Yep.
So the interesting thing here is normally there's a divergent point or something changes. Nothing changes in the book. It's just later.
Yep, it is. I think it's our first one where it's just later on down the timeline.
Which, once again, she kind of did last time. But I kind of like it because some of the questions we've had were kind of or just straight up lies. I didn't know what to think about the question of what if Alice showed up really late? And so I thought it was going to be like the last book where Wendy is 16 when she first goes to Neverland. But it starts as like, nope, Wonderland definitely happened.
Yeah, she definitely questions herself about whether or not it happened, but they do confirm it definitely happened.
So, yeah, she's older, which is different. It's new.
And she's closer to 18 this time, I think, right?
She is 18.
Yeah, an adult.
So when she talks about getting married, it's not weird.
Yeah. Also, something that I didn't even think to mention, I love how protective her dad is, because the sister, right, and this is kind of getting into the initial thing, the sister wants to set her up on a date, and because she's perceiving her as becoming an old maid, which is ironic considering the older sister is also still single. And then there's that one brief scene where the dad's like, yeah, you can try, but no thanks.
Yeah.
And he's just like, my baby girl's not getting married. What are you talking about?
I mean, granted, I'm going to take away the protective license later on when she points out, oh no, boys still come over. Dad just doesn't see them because he's convinced if he doesn't see them, they don't exist.
Yeah.
And I was just like, bruh. But then you see him at the very end, and we'll get to that, but I do like the parents.
Yeah.
A lot. Every time I see them, I'm happy, and I don't know where in the story you could have shoehorned them in, so I get it, but I did like them, and I would have liked to see more of them.
They were good.
But we start off with, believe it or not, someone trying to set our main character up on a date.
Who would have thunk it?
Someone should have given her a toy dog, honestly. We might as well be blatant about it. But no, legitimately, I put in my notes, I was like, great, another date we're not gonna see. We do see it.
We do.
Thank you, Liz. It becomes a huge plot point.
It does.
It's not just like a little throwaway. Appreciated. Anyway, she's gotten super into photography. And so she has this portable camera she grabs and runs around and looks for Wonderland-esque things. And then she goes and develops them with her aunt in the dark room.
Love the aunt character.
The aunt is pretty great.
Just like in the last book.
Yes.
The aunt was great.
How many aunts have we had? We had a quote-unquote aunt character in Sleeping Beauty, but it was Maleficent, so she was kind of trash. And then, oh no, I think we've had 2 aunts.
Yeah, there haven't been too many. Disney does a good job typically with like that aunt grandma character.
Yeah.
But the last 2, we've had particularly fun aunts. Because, yes, it was Prince Charming's aunt. It was Prince's aunt. She was a huge mentor to Cinderella.
Oh, 100%. So, not as many aunts as I thought there were. 3 out of 10 have an aunt character. So, as she's developing her camera one day, she starts to notice instead of the photos themselves, Wonderland creatures are the thing that shows. So she finds a mirror bird, she finds the Mad Hatter, and the mirror bird and the Mad Hatter look very concerned and worried. Then she finds the Queen of Hearts looking super smug and kind of sinisterly happy.
Yep.
And the woman they turned into the Queen of Hearts was done dirty, frankly.
Absolutely.
So done dirty because its whole thing is they're parallel storylines, and so people that do bad in Wonderland do bad in real life. And Tweedledee and Tweedledum represent this mayor candidate.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
And the twin brother, because I guess they have to be twins or whatever, who helps him do it. And he's just super xenophobic, super hateful, the worst person, the type of person that would encourage violence while acting like, oh no, the English first.
Yeah.
Type of rhetoric. They're actually villains in this story. And the White Rabbit is a villain in this story.
Yep.
It's the love interest, not the love interest, but the guy that she got set up on one date with and then becomes obsessed with her, ? I have questions about that.
Low-key. It was very weird.
It was weird because it didn't feel like it happened, but it did. Anyway, the point is, so those guys are running around doing things and legitimately worried because there's this square that Alice goes to, and it's in the rougher part of town, but it's essentially just a Jewish quarter. There's a bunch of Jewish children play in the square, and the rhetoric and actions they're taking is causing the children harm, like the children to get arrested.
Yeah.
For nothing, just because they're Jewish, and that rhetoric is running around. It's like, oh, you're not actually English. And what gets me is they talk out of both sides of their mouth because they're like, oh yeah, they're terrible because they moved from Russia, and so clearly they're destroying Russia, and now they've come here to destroy it.
Yeah.
If you, dear listener, do not understand why that's so terrible, please, I tell you to go watch Fiddler on the Roof. They didn't do anything, and it's heartbreaking. And so imagine the end of Fiddler on the Roof. They're having to leave their home and everything behind. They're having to walk who knows how many miles to somewhere that's safe. They finally make it to England, and it's tough because they're xenophobic and racist and rude, and it's hard to live, and then your children are just getting arrested because why not?
Yep.
So they're causing actual harm to real people, and at the end of the book, it's a very climactic of why they have to stop him is because he's promoting violence.
Yep.
And this other lady just wants to babysit your kids.
Well, and then the other thing too, we draw the parallel is that it doesn't have to be exactly male to female, right? The Wonderland parallel, because now granted it's a caterpillar, but the caterpillar was always typically a masculine character. And the caterpillar was imposed on her aunt, right?
And her sister was the dodo, who was specifically a he.
Yeah, exactly. So you didn't have to stick with that. You could have given this role. I don't know. The only reason I guess the mayor didn't get the Queen of Hearts role is because she needed the twin settings, like you said, for Tweedledee and Tweedledum.
But if you had made them not twins, what if you gave him twin brothers?
Yeah.
That would have made more sense, because in Wonderland, she goes through and she sees Tweedledee and Tweedledum are serving the Queen of Hearts. And she's like, oh, well, that's what side you're on. And so that would have worked out. He's the Queen of Hearts, and then he has twin brothers who are Tweedledee and Tweedledum.
Yeah.
But this lady got done so dirty. We see her once.
Mrs. Poggy's Dunhow.
And she talks loud. Okay. That is her sin, is she yells.
Yep, she's boisterous.
But other than that, and she's like, oh, she always has a baby. So she's watching somebody else's kids. And Alice is like, oh yeah, my mother has gout. And so she's like, oh, well, you need to watch how much meat you're eating. And it's framed in a way to be like, oh, you know, that hippie. Or it's like, oh, put onions in your socks. But she's right.
But it's actually, yeah, not bad advice.
Yeah, that is correct. That is exactly how gout is formed. You are absolutely correct. And we never see her ever again.
Yeah, she really doesn't come in at all.
No, and so I thought she was going to like come up later as a huge supporter for this mayor candidate. And maybe while she's promoting him becomes an overzealous herself. But no.
Nope, just there to establish the parallel.
I don't think she ever gets her portrait either that Alice was supposed to do of her.
Oh, yeah, you're right. No, I don't think so.
She got done dirty.
Poor done dirty, Mrs. Poggy's Dunhow.
So in the square, she meets this guy named, okay. His name is Abraham Joseph Katz.
Yep.
Katz, which I a little bit wonder if it's Kaskawit or Kaskwazi or a more traditionally Jewish last name and he just shortened it.
Maybe.
Because if it was like Katskowitz, and it's like, okay, that's a little bit more subtle, but it's just straight up Katz. Katz.
Yep.
Come on, Alice.
She does not put that connection together at all. Doesn't even take a picture of him.
And later on, she's like, oh, I need to take a picture. He's like, you know who I am.
Yeah.
His eyes are almost orange. He's got this gigantic smile. He's got a purple cravat.
Yeah.
Weirdly enough, he has super dark red hair and brown eyebrows.
Yeah, that was a little off. But come on, my dear. You're looking for parallels and you don't see that one.
Yeah, and he's like, oh yeah, I know Russian and Latin. And then the next time she sees the Cheshire Cat starts talking in Latin.
Yep.
Come on.
Little dense there, Alice.
But he's really cool. His parents were immigrants and he became a barrister. And so he does a lot of pro bono work for the Jewish people because he is also Jewish, because he understands how hard it is to come into this world and not have good legal representation.
Yeah.
Because the laws obviously are stacked against them and kind of terrible. But they meet and he calls her out for exploitation because she's taking pictures of the kids. And so she's like, you're either profiting off this or exploiting them. I mean, both. And so she's like, no, I'm not. And so you kind of see both sides of it, which I appreciate.
Yeah.
Because he's totally right. People absolutely do that. People still do that now when they go on mission trips and they don't actually really do anything. They're just like, oh my gosh, here's a picture of me with all these brown or black children. Look how happy they are to see white people. You know, that white savior thing.
Yeah.
So absolutely happens. And then you have businesses that exploit pictures of these children or political people that whatever cause they're doing and they don't actually help the children in any sort of way. And so he calls her out for doing that and she's like, that is not what I'm doing.
No.
And I appreciate that he's like, okay, cool, you're not doing that. Great, I'm glad. I jumped to conclusions. Yeah, fair enough. But I kind of get why he jumped to conclusions.
Oh, no, for sure. And he obviously knows her. He's been watching her too. I think he mentions like, oh, of course, everybody knows Alice. But I think the most important thing is it does kind of set them up as those intellectual equals.
Yeah, they are an intellectual match because she steps up to him.
Yeah, for sure.
And stands her ground and makes him back down a little bit, which I love. I love a power couple.
Oh, yeah.
I love when they do this and it's like, oh, the guy's amazing, but she's amazing. Yes, power couple. Let's go. Save the world.
And they do.
And they do.
But then we contrast him to the other person she gets set up with. And I think that's obviously the thing is the dichotomy of those two different characters and personalities.
Which I would like a word with the author can't do this to me. The sister's boyfriend is named Corwin Hedstruth.
Hedstruth, yeah.
And so they call him Hedstruth for a little bit, but then it becomes more familiar because they're getting closer, and so they start calling him by his first name, Corwin. Well, that never happens with the other guy's date, and so we never call him Richard. We're always calling him Connolly.
Connolly, yeah.
So we have Corwin and Connolly, and I kept mixing them up when I was writing them down.
And Coney, don't forget, the actual mayor politic is Coney.
Thankfully, we don't talk about him enough for me to care about him, but yes, the C names.
It's a lot.
Ma'am. And so I kept writing like Cornley. Yeah, Corley or Conwin. Gosh, dang it.
Yeah.
So we get to meet him, and so that's where even in my notes, I stand corrected. I was wrong. We do get to see the date. And I should have known immediately. He's described as having platinum blonde hair, and he has white eyelashes and blue eyes, and he's very pale.
Yep.
So later on, I'm like, ooh, is he the Knave of Hearts? No, he's the White Rabbit.
Yeah.
Duh, Sam.
Of course.
Apparently, he's part of the party that her sister's a part of and her boyfriend. So it's this huge deal, and that's why she's trying to set up Alice with him to be like, hey, he's going to be important politically. And Alice is like, cool, I hate everything you stand for.
Who cares?
He just starts very casually spewing typical racist stuff. And Alice challenges him and is like, I hate everything.
Yeah. Again, we know she can hold her own.
And she looks for the first excuse to not be around him anymore. They're in the parlor drinking tea. And then her aunt sent by post her camera and her photos that she had developed earlier that day. So as soon as those come in, she's like, bye, and just leaves.
I'm done. I have graced you enough with my presence, which I appreciate the confidence.
Absolutely. So she looks them over, and the Wonderlandians are calling for help. She took a picture of her aunt, which is the caterpillar, and the caterpillar is looking like he's asking for help. I think the smoke turns into save us.
Yeah.
And then she took a self-portrait, and it's this girl with black hair. She's got a bandana over her eyes.
No, she's blonde.
She is blonde?
She's blonde. She looks exactly like Alice in every way. I thought, at least. It was black blood. That's what you're thinking of.
Maybe that is.
Yeah. Creepy image, by the way.
And that's the only one that moves.
Yeah.
And she pulls out a banner that says Unbirthday. And so Alice is like, I have to get back here.
Yeah, this is real. I gotta figure this out.
100% I need to get back here. So she's doing everything she can. She's like, so how did I do this the first time? She tries to replicate. She packs a picnic. She goes to the park. She's trying to find the exact tree she laid under, but it's been 11 years.
Yeah.
So the tree don't look like the tree looked like then. So she's trying to figure that out, and she's trying to get sleepy when she runs into cats again. And Alice kind of skirts around what she's doing. And here's when I was like super suspicious. He's like, oh, I'm on my way to meet an old friend. And she's like, oh, sorry, I didn't mean to take up your time or whatever. He's like, no, they can wait.
Yeah, because in our head, he knows it's her.
Old friend, you say? Or are they rather striped? Super obvious. Anyway, so he agrees to tell her story. And so he starts telling her stories, and she apparently falls asleep. The way it's done is Alice looks out into the pond. She sees a duck, but the reflected duck says, help us or something. And so she runs over there, jumps in the water.
Dives in,
which I immediately was like, Alice, mirrors, girl, not under, like go to the mirror of it. But it worked out. She's right.
It did.
So she goes into this place. It's a one-story, it's kind of Roman mansion. Everything's covered in red, very weirdly so. And she just hears this cacophony of noise that seems to be horribly amplified. And so I thought for a second she had found a different world, and this world was a repeated, because there's a paragraph she writes on one page, and then you turn the page, you read the next one, and then 2 pages later is the exact same paragraph. And so I was wondering if this was a repeated world instead of a mirrored world, but now I'm just wondering if that was an editing mistake.
Yeah, I feel like probably that, because I honestly cannot recall if that even made it into the audiobook.
Yeah, I started reading and I was like, this feels like deja vu. And then I turned back to the other page and it was like, this is the exact same paragraph. And I was like, oh, clearly that was on purpose. No.
Maybe. Let us know your thoughts.
Who knows? Maybe it was, but I'm starting to question that at this point. Anyway, it's been 11 years since she was in Wonderland. Now she learns that there's daily tea time executions, and today's just so happens to be the Hatter, the Dormouse, and the Dodo.
Oh no.
You picked a great day, Alice. Alice is terrible at this. She walks up to the person guarding the VIP area, and it's the Knave of Accounting.
So good.
I'm so curious what that card looks like.
Yes.
Knave, if you don't know, is the Jack. We call them Jacks now and not Knaves.
Oh, okay.
I'm just so curious what a Knave of Accounting would look like.
Yeah, this is one where I'm definitely like, oh, please create a comic. I want to see these characters.
Yeah, I mean, Straight On to Morning was the second graphic novel, so I'm so for it. Anyway, she has this random monocle that she picked up from her aunt's house because she was trying to look at something magnified. And so she just has it in her pocket and she's like, I must go in there. And he's like, no. And she's like, but I must go in there and I have to save my friends. You know, she's very upfront about the fact she's saving her friends and very bad at it.
Yes.
Because she's literally like, I must save my friends. And he's like, no. He's like, oh no, wait a second. I was here yesterday, even though you have the list in front of you. I was here yesterday and I left something there. And he's like, cool. No. And she's like, I'm literally trying to commit treason.
Yep.
He's like, cool. I do not care. But Alice, you can't be like, oh, I'm going to commit treason. But wait, I left my glove in there. But really, I'm going to commit treason.
And then she puts on the monocle. And
then she pulls out the monocle.
He's like, hey, I know you.
And he's like, oh, you're from accounting or legal. And eventually she ends up deciding that she's from accounting. Oh my gosh. And so she gets let in because she's from accounting. That is the first time ever being from accounting gets you into a VIP section.
Yeah. No, it was such a good. And again, this is where, reflecting back on it, I can see why the lack of rules and structure makes sense, because
it's a children's world.
Yeah, exactly. It's a children's world. She just keeps trying things until it works. But in my head, I'm just like, that shouldn't have worked. Give me her now little side quest to get into the stadium and bust in and bust through. But nope, she just keeps trying things.
No, it's 100% children playing. And they're like, I want to go in. He's like, no, you can't. But I want to go in. No, you can't. Well, I have this monocle.
Yep.
And I put it on and it makes me look like I'm from accounting. Oh yeah, go inside. I've watched so much Sesame Street lately. It reminds me of the Abby and Elmo are playing grocery store and adds up all the stuff and she's like, that'll be $1 gazillion. And Elmo says, Elmo has a T-Rex and a Go Fish card. And she says, perfect.
That's pretty good.
It's just children's play. It's literally like, oh, well, I have this magic stick and I can do the thing. And all the other kids are like, you have a magic stick. You can do the thing. 100%. I see it. So she goes in the VIP area. Apparently everyone has to watch an execution every once a quarter, but the queen doesn't show up anymore.
Yeah, she just is not important to her.
What's the point?
Yeah.
And I thought, okay, maybe she's doing something important and she's busy, so she can't do it anymore. She's not.
No, she's literally not. She's just delegating now.
The ants, the literal ants, the insect, not the human being familial connection, are the ones doing all the hard work, and so are the soldiers. This was her favorite thing in the world. Why is she not showing up to these? The answer is so Alice can save her friends and not get caught by the queen, but sus.
Yeah.
There's also a note about, there's a couple times where she's like, oh, Wonderlandians, when it's totally something that happens in real life. There's a note about how rich people get free stuff and poor people have to buy it.
Yeah.
Which always makes me think of the Britney Spears interview after she got pretty famous, and she talked about how she grew up poor in Louisiana, and she was like, when I didn't have anything and I needed things, no one gave me anything, but now that I'm rich and I can buy the things, everyone gives me free stuff. And she's like, I just don't understand why that's a thing. Yep, absolutely.
Absolutely.
So she runs into this other guy and a fox, and apparently Wonderland is sexist.
Definitely has the vibes.
It was supposed to turn it on its head because she's in accounting and he's like, oh, I have a little kit myself, you know, baby fox, and she's a girl, and you know, women can do much more than be queens and ladies in waiting. Which is supposed to turn its head like they're at the top of the hierarchy versus in the real world they're at the bottom of the hierarchy. And it's like, oh, women can do more than have babies and make food, whatever the stereotypes. That was random. Okay. It never comes up again. I put sexist into the content warning and then it never came up. And so I took it out.
Yeah, no, because it's that one answer and then he just throws it out. Then you're like, okay. Again, Liz, you have a problem with writing the line of show me, don't tell me. And she does a good job of showing us in this book, not telling us, but this was very much a telling us moment.
Yeah, I think it was just a throwaway line. I think it was just supposed to be a joke.
Yeah, probably.
Anyway, apparently eat me and drink me treats don't work anymore.
Nope, because she doesn't believe in herself.
So Alice just kind of yells at them.
Get attention.
They bring the three out. They're about to do the execution. This one guy is yelling or whatever about the execution, what their crimes are and whatever. And Alice just kind of yells at him and is like, no.
Don't do this.
What do you mean, no? She's like, no. What do you mean, no? And she's like, we need a fair trial. And people start nodding. I know it parallels the real world, but there is no reason Wonderlandians would even have a concept of what a fair trial is.
No.
Anyway, so she basically creates enough of a commotion for the Mad Hatter and the Dormouse to get on the dodo. And this was hilarious. I laughed so hard. They get on the dodo and you're like, oh no, what can they do? And then the dodo flies off.
Yep.
And everyone in the crowd is confused. Everyone. And I was like, they're a flightless bird. And someone was like, well, they're extinct. They might as well get the chance to fly.
In this fantasy world, they can. What if a dodo could fly?
It would have been as funny if Alice was the only one that's like, oh my goodness, like the entire audience is so confused.
Yeah.
That this dodo can fly. Anyway, and so that gets her in trouble because now she's going to be charged with helping them escape. And so she has to run away from them.
Get away.
And she ends up in the maze she was in earlier, which leads to another kind of funny part. She meets a bishop. Oh, she does this so many times in the book where someone's like, hey, you need to do the thing right now. And she's like, why? And it's like, Alice, just do the thing.
Just do the thing.
Just do the thing. Because every time she's like, I need to trust Wonderland. And then the next time it would come around, she's like, but why? It's like, Alice, we need to do the thing right now. You're actively being chased by cards.
Yeah.
And so he's like, oh, you need to act like a pawn. So she refuses and keeps running. And there's this moment where a snake comes out. It's like, oh, I'm from the White Rabbit. Whose side are you on? And she's like, I have no idea. That's a great question.
What are you talking about?
But she has a moment where she's like, oh, I don't trust snakes. I've heard about how venomous they can be. They can kill you in so little time because they're venomous. And then she has the line of, also the Bible and all.
Yeah.
So she's like, I don't trust you. So she just takes the branch he's on, pulls it out, and flings him into the bush.
She said, bye, Felicia.
Bye. We're gone. I can't. It's so funny. Anyway, so then the Cheshire Cat shows up, knows Latin.
Heyo.
Doesn't ring any bells for Alice. Granted, a lot's going on, but come on, girl. And he explains that she woke up too early.
The first time.
And this was the point where I was like, oh, is that the changing point? Did she stay a little longer? But I watched the end of the movie, that scene. And no, she's being chased.
That's how she escapes.
By cards.
Yeah.
And the Queen of Hearts is yelling off with her head over and over again, just like it's described in the book. And she wakes up. And so continuation, no divergent point.
Not at all. Yeah.
Crazy. Anyway, he's like, you need to find Mary Ann, who is her Alice in Wonderland counterpart.
Yep. Who we never met any other time, just randomly referenced in the original movie.
Yeah, because she was with the White Rabbit and he kept calling her Mary Ann. And apparently is some sort of servant that works for him. Anyway, that's never completely cleared up.
No.
But does have connection to White Rabbit. So he gives her a riddle. And I love that Alice is smart in this book. There's several times where she does something really smart. And here's one of them where he gives her a riddle and when he disappears, she's like, the answer's doll, by the way.
And that's maybe the only riddle she gets in the moment, the whole rest of the book.
Yeah. But I appreciate that. She has a moment where she's like, yes. And so she's like, okay, so is the Queen the doll? Or is Mary Ann the doll? And I appreciate that line of thinking, but having read the book now and looking back, the Queen of Hearts is stealing dolls. All of them.
Yep, that was our first clue.
And that was our first clue about the toys. So there we go. Thanks, Cheshire. You make perfect sense in hindsight.
Yeah, right. And that's kind of the whole point. I did not understand a single thing about what this book was setting up as I was reading it. But then, like you said, in going back and reflecting on it, you can be like, oh, yep, the doll. Like you said, the Queen of Hearts not being present. Then being like, oh, who do you work for? I'm with the rabbit. Why is the rabbit a faction of his own self? Yeah, the hindsight is a lot easier to put it all together.
Yeah, if we reread this, it would make so much more sense.
Yeah.
So at this point, she looks into the sky and she sees her friends, which is also another funny scene because he's flying across the air, going as fast as they can. And then there's this airship following them, shooting. I can't remember at this point what it is. I think plungers or pies. I can't remember what it is, but it's falling short of them.
Yeah.
So you just see all these things just not hitting them. And Alice is like, no, my friends, and starts running toward them. And thankfully, the maze allows her to do that. That's kind of the point of the maze, is you can't get from A to B very easily, but
it works.
Anyway, she runs after them so she can get to her friends, and she meets up with them, and it's like, you're okay. And they're like, you're okay. And they're happy to see her and whatnot.
Okay, you're here.
They get all together to figure themselves out, and they start talking about the Queen of Hearts playing War.
Yeah, the actual game War.
The actual game of War. It's a capital W.
Which did not come across well in the audiobook, so I had absolutely no idea.
No, you were so confused.
So confused. I was like, okay, so she's starting a war. Cool. But then, like you said, in the context of she has cards. Makes sense.
She's cards. She's literally playing the card game War. If you don't know what that is, you split the deck into two amongst two people. You flip over the cards on the top. Whoever has the higher gets the other person's card.
Yep.
And you're trying to get all of the cards to win. That's the card game War. And they talk about later, oh, well, it's predetermined. There's no real skill in it. But if none of you played it with your grandma like I did growing up, that's what War is. And so that's kind of the hint towards more childhood fantasies, because that's what Wonderland is.
Yeah.
It's children's games.
Yep, that's all we're doing here.
Over and over and over again until the clock resets, I guess.
And that's what we were leading to the whole daggum time.
Runs after them, gets into Tulgey Woods again. A mom wraith. I meant to look these up.
The mom wraith?
Yeah.
It's those little,
Oh my gosh, they're so much cuter!
Yeah, they are. They're cute.
They're like little pants with googly eyes and pom-pom for hair.
Yeah.
Okay. I imagine them like, you know those dogs that lay down and they look like a mop?
Oh, nope.
Nope, that is not what that is. Okay, so apparently all the mom wraiths have been getting stepped on. It is very sad.
Yeah, that's a callback from the original movie, because she does almost step on it because you don't realize what it is.
All right, so she meets up with the friends. It also takes Alice way too long to realize that the March Hare is dead. There's a couple hints, and then someone just has to come out and say it. And it was just, welcome back, Dark Liz.
Yeah, and with a dense character.
Yeah, and the Mad Hatter talks about his eye later, how he was given to a bunch of hungry birds and stuff, and it was just like, geez.
Yeah.
Very dark. Welcome back. It would not be a Liz Braswell book without it.
Nope.
That one book that we read where she was not dark, that was weird.
Yeah.
Which I actually think was Straight On Till Morning, was weirdly not dark, except for sometimes.
Yeah, it was less dark overall, I think.
But that's because we thought she was going to go into the whole Peter Pan possibly murdering children to keep them from growing up, but you know. Anyway, so they need to find Mary Ann, and she was in prison, but now they're convinced she's not in prison, so they need to go to the Grundaround.
Yep, good job, Grundaround.
So they start traveling together. I love this early hints that Alice forgets the real world when she's in Wonderland, because she very clearly comes out halfway through the book, and she's like, when I'm in this world, I forget that one, but if I'm in that world, I forget this one.
Yeah.
And there's a moment where they're discussing poetry, when it's her turn, she's like, oh, I know the national anthem about our queen.
Yep.
They're like, okay, go ahead and sing it. And then it's an American patriotism song.
Yep.
And it's not even the American national anthem. It's just a random one.
Yeah, that was really funny.
And she's like, wait a second, that's not right.
It doesn't even mention a queen.
And just to prove that Wonderland suits Liz better than Neverland, when they get out of this umbrella, the Hatter is like, okay, umbrella, go on, go be free. And Alice is like, you're not going to bring in with you? And he's like, he served his terms and conditions. And he waves to the umbrella, and the umbrella waves back at him. And that was so much more satisfying and like, okay, that makes sense. Then when Wendy pushed the boat back into the channel, it was like, oh, if we need you, you'll come back.
Yeah, the literal parallel between those two stories. And it's just like, yep, this one, it doesn't actually need to make sense, so it works better.
For sure. I think this Wonderland suits her so much better. Maybe Neverland would have suited her better with 200 extra pages, but you know. So they go to a bird city that has a lot of white rabbit symbols.
Yeah, this is weird.
But but sometimes red. And a hastily made rabbit statue, and all the residents, despite being birds, have some sort of rabbit something on their clothing.
Or is trying to mimic rabbits.
Yeah. And they have carrots and other vegetable offerings at the statue of the rabbit. And they're basically like, oh, when the rabbit's men show up, we're ready. But rabbit having an army never really comes up in the book. Because when we go to his house, it's a deck of cards, which are from the Queen of Hearts.
Yeah.
I have questions.
So how he's separating out when it's him or when it's him and the queen doesn't really make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
But again, Wonderland.
At this point, we meet up with Griffin. I think it is a new character.
Yeah, I don't remember that one from the original.
And then you meet Bill the gardener.
Yes, poor little Bill.
And Alice doesn't understand at first why Bill sees her and basically says, she's gotten bigger, and then passes out.
Yeah.
And Alice doesn't get it, and I'm like, oh, poor Bill.
Yeah, she's even bigger than last time when she destroyed his house.
Yeah, and terrified the poor thing.
Yeah.
So she once again tries the eat me thing, and it's like you said, they're like, oh, clearly you've forgotten how to do this, so we need to go to the Forest of Forgetting so you can remember how to do the thing. And they start listing things that she needs to forget, like forget mathematics, forget this and that. And one of them is forget the traveling speed of the unladen sparrow. And low-key, I was like, is that a Monty Python reference?
Oh.
Not quite. But then a sparrow.
Actual sparrow.
It's like, excuse me. And the description of the sparrow is unladen except for a small briefcase.
Yeah, that was a pretty good joke when they literally mentioned the sparrow and then all of a sudden there's a sparrow there. And you're like, oh, okay, nice.
Wonderland, man. So they go to the Forest of Forgetting. She goes into it and she forgets literally everything. And she meets this other guy who is there and has forgotten everything and is apparently eating some tarts. But when they cross the river, they find out that this is the Knave of Hearts.
Right hand man.
Yeah. But he's like, no, it's fine. I stole the tarts from the queen, which is apparently a whole other thing. But I stole the tarts from the queen, so now the queen wants to get rid of me. So you should totally take me with you.
Yeah. There was a brief moment where I was doubting myself with the cats thing because I was like, how have they not made this parallel yet? How has she not connected this yet? And so there was part of me that was like, okay, is Cats the knave? Because they were described very similarly, charming and suave and all that kind of stuff. But then I was like, no, that's impossible.
His last name is Cats.
I know.
You can't go that far wrong.
Well, part of me was like, is that a misleading thing? Like, are you intentionally trying to mislead me and you're going to rip the cover over my eyes later?
It was the purple ascot for me, really.
Yeah.
If he had a red ascot, I could see it. But anyway, they continue on. Cheshire shows up again, and Alice is like, you should join me. But instead, he just gives her a riddle and leaves.
Poor Cheshire.
They can't solve that one, and then Alice brings up the one the Hatter used to give her, and she has like 3 answers, and he's like, eh.
That's not how riddles work.
And she's like, that is literally how riddles work. And they're like, nah. At this point, they've been traveling for a bit, and she finally mentions Mary and the knave, and he reacts minutely. Oh dear.
They point out that he gives a reaction. You're like, well, he knows something.
Well, he's gonna be trouble.
Yep.
So they go to the Underground, which is literally a hole in the ground, and Dormouse and Bill are able to get in there. And so this is the first time Alice has her Deus Ex Machina powers. She's just so mad about it, because she eats a thing and she wants to shrink, but it doesn't work. She's so mad about it. She literally takes the end of the hole and makes it bigger.
Yeah, I guess up until the end, is that the only time where she actually takes advantage of manipulating the environment around her instead of her being manipulated?
Oh no, she manipulates stuff all the time.
Okay.
Going to the castle with the clubs, she makes the thing bigger and with perspective making it closer.
That's right.
And then she breaks a portal into the time land. And with the card cutter, she crushes the dude's skull because perspective.
That's right.
And that's the answer to Katz's riddle that he gives her is perspective. And so the entire book, she's using perspective to accomplish things instead of shrinking and growing. Okay, so they're in this bar turned hospital.
Yeah.
The only drop subplot for me is she grabs 3 jars of liquid. One says drink me, one says violets, and one says ours.
Oh, yeah.
And that never comes up. Later on, she's even like, oh my gosh, I have no treats in my pocket. I'm like, you have a vial of liquid that says drink me.
She kept collecting stuff any chance they got, though, because I feel like through the whole book, any chance she got to eat those treats or whatever, she would collect them and put them in her pockets.
Yeah, but she would typically use it. Anyway, she didn't use any of those 3. And that's the only drop subplot that I can think of off the top of my head. But there's a secret back room where she runs into Caterpillar again. He has two people with them, and they're the ones that inform her that Marianne is dead.
Yep.
Dead. She gone.
Dead and gone.
And so the Hatter switches tactics, like, Alice, you should take her place. And Alice wants to protest, which is she's kind of already talked herself into it.
Yeah.
So she's like, okay, let's collect my friends. We'll make a plan. And that's when she realizes the knave never entered the Grunder round.
Yep, he was the last one in.
And then there's booming outside.
She's like, well, dadgummit, he betrayed us, unsurprisingly.
And she realizes that the riddle that Cheshire gave her was that the knave wasn't trustworthy.
But no one else could solve it.
Girl, shouldn't have needed a riddle for that.
Yeah.
Anyway, so the place gets attacked and Alice wakes up.
Mm-hmm.
So she ends up going to Wonderland 3 times and back to the real world 3 times.
Oh, really?
Technically 4 if you want to include the beginning. And I kind of like the back and forth because it helps, first of all, establish some of the characters better and Alice's and Kat's relationship, and also setting up the real world parallels of the mare race and stuff. And so there's some that obviously, oh, this one's way more interesting than that one. But I liked both of them.
I really did too, honestly. There were definitely times where I was kind of done with Wonderland. I want to go back and see Alice be Alice.
Yeah, and I want to see Kat's more. He's pretty cool.
Yeah. Cinderella was the first romance plotline that we actually liked, and we shipped the two of them together, and I feel like this one was pretty good too. I was a little weirded out that he was a Cheshire Cat in the end, but I was so glad that they ended up together because they were each other's intellectual matches. You can tell Alice needs that.
Yeah. And up until this point, you've known that the political party that Coney is a part of are xenophobes.
Yeah, totally.
But I was kind of shocked, given the time period for English manners, that Coney just came up and just went on an anti-Semitic rant in front of a lady.
That is fair.
It was kind of shocking. He had zero manners about it, and it was the most vile things coming out of his mouth. And so at that moment, I thought Connie was the knave, just because we had just dealt with the knave. But if I had put any thought into it, he has platinum blonde hair and his eyelashes are white.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, so Coney goes on this horrible rant, and then Katz kind of stands up for herself. And then Alice waxes poetic about men doing stuff in the pursuit of women. Alice, this isn't about you.
Yeah.
Where did you get that? I mean, yeah, one of them has feelings for you, and she points out the other one has desires from imagery, the look of the relationship.
Yeah.
But in that moment in time, this isn't about you, Alice. This is about a xenophobe.
Yeah.
But it was very weird that he just went on this horrible, super rude rant in public, in front of a lady.
Yeah, because they're canonically in a park, right? Or something like that with other people around it.
They're in a park, a public park.
Yeah. No, I mean, I do kind of get why she thinks it's about him, because Coney approaches the conversation of, oh, is this man bothering you, right? It comes from that anti-Semitic place and that racist place, but he's, oh, I need to be the one over here to protect Alice from these people, quote unquote, you know?
Gotta protect the women. So Alice at this point is trying to do everything she can to fall asleep and get back to Wonderland.
Yep.
And she has a vision of a castle that must be important. I can't remember at this point. It might have been the Queen of Clubs castle that she saw.
I think, yeah, that was the first indication of the Queen of Clubs.
But Matilda wants to talk to her, and she kind of scolds Alice because Coney ended up walking her home, and she just didn't talk to him and then shut the door in his face.
Yeah.
I don't blame her.
Nope.
And so Matilda's scolding her about this, and then Alice is like, no, he was rude. And I kind of wanted to give Matilda points for immediately believing Alice's side of the story.
Yeah.
Because Coney twisted it for sure. And so she really easily could have been like, oh, no, you were just super rude to him. Blah, 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 blah. But she immediately is like, oh, well.
You should still apologize, though.
Please apologize because Coney's giving my boyfriend a hard time.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's your hints that Coney is a terrible person.
Absolutely horrible.
But this doesn't get played up enough. At this point, Alice decides, or I guess Matilda hints that Coney is a terrible person who won't give up on Alice.
Mm-hmm.
That's not really played to full effect. I never really got that vibe that he was obsessed with her. Even considering the stuff he does later, that's all seems to be in the pursuit of his political career and not to get Alice.
But I think they were kind of tied up in the two, because at one point Alice even made the comment, oh, well, I can see why he wants it. Like the idea of a pair of political partners and then having married with the sisters. Alice knows from the beginning it's the idea of her more than actually her.
Yeah, it's just, there's not a scene where I feel like I would have gotten that if they hadn't just straight out said it.
Yeah, if they hadn't been blatant about it.
But somehow Alice gets talked into going to this fundraiser that their political candidate is hosting. And I was like, darn it. Was kind of hoping we could skip it.
Nope.
No.
We do get some important information out of it.
And I like how it's handled. She kind of touches on the fact that he uses pretty words to say hateful things and to rile up the crowd. But she doesn't sit down and make you listen to the whole thing.
Yes, yeah, she doesn't have to type out her own anti-Semitic rant, like you said.
Yeah, I don't want to read that. I'm on social media.
Yeah, we got it.
It's enough where teenagers who may or may not have a lot of experience with that type of manipulation can be like, oh, I see it.
Yeah, they can recognize it.
I see how he's manipulated using pretty words and sentiments to say horrible, hateful things, but in a way where you couldn't call him out for saying horrible, hateful things.
Yeah.
What, you don't believe that England should put its citizens first? That manipulative turnaround.
Yep.
But before she has a little lecture, she stops by this lady, Mrs. Yao's tea shop, and a rock has been thrown through the window. And the tea owner knows who did it, but the little kid that didn't doesn't know how to read or write.
Yeah.
So he didn't write the note. And the note was written by someone with really nice handwriting.
Yeah, very flourishy.
This dude's an idiot.
Very much so.
He's so stupid. It's not a mystery. We've already done spoilers. Coney is an idiot.
Yeah, he really is.
He writes in his own handwriting to do a hate crime. And that's his undoing, is people recognize it's his handwriting.
Yeah, and it's in a small town. Didn't
try to disguise it. Didn't try to get someone else to write it. Might as well have signed your name, buddy.
Yep.
He's so stupid. So Alice takes a picture of the broken window and Mrs. Yao and the pebble. And she wants to give it to the newspaper to bring attention to the hate crime and advertise the tea shop. And I, in my very, very cynical brain, thought, and granted, this is Liz, so it could have happened. I thought that was going to backfire. I thought it was going to cause Mrs. Yao to be the center of more hate crimes.
Oh.
Because this whole fever pitch of go back to your own country.
Yeah.
And people would stay away because they would be like, oh, maybe we shouldn't support this person or whatever. That doesn't end up happening.
No. I figured if it was going to come back, it was going to come back on Alice. But like you said, they even kind of addressed it a little bit in the end where it's just like, well, I need this to get published, so I'm just going to cave to what I know the political landscape is here and have a man publish it for me.
Or at least bring it to the paper, yeah.
Yeah, because ultimately the important thing is that the help is outreached.
Yeah, she's like, it's more important that the thing is accomplished than I stand up for all of womankind at this point.
Yeah.
And I appreciate the priorities because that's what a good politician should do.
Yeah. So that is kind of how it a little bit, not backfires, but it is an important, and I will say, like you said, not a dropped thread. It does come back later. It's very interwoven. Which,
once again, a great message for teenagers, because I think the reason we see so many protests being from young people is they're young enough to have the energy. First of all, energy is very important.
Yes.
The energy, but also the mindset still of I can change the world. They aren't as jaded. They aren't as beat down. They don't have as many commitments, so they can do something like this.
Yeah.
But that's also why a lot of them are bad at it, not having that real world experience and the humility required to be successful. Not to say everyone sucks at it, but it takes a very specific type of person to be a successful advocate for a cause. So I appreciate that she's like, what is important here? Is it important that I myself get credit for this? Or is it important that in the current moment, attention is brought that a crime has been committed? Ethics. We're having an ethics lesson here.
It did give me very similar like Harry Potter vibes. You are being taught how to stand up against and unjust and, like you said, cause as a teenager with limited power and limited capability. I feel like she did do that pretty well.
Standing up to systemic power.
Yes, exactly, which is hard to do, but figuring out how you as a teenager or a young person is able to do that with the limited power that you have.
Yeah. So it's not that her cause of, I mean, it wasn't technically her cause, but her as a woman wanting to publish a photo was not a bad cause.
No.
But she realized that the bigger cause here was the attention on Mrs. Yao and not on herself. And I totally believe she became a suffragette and a feminist, and she and Wendy met up at rallies. But I really appreciated that lesson there.
Yeah.
But us talking about the ending aside, so she also takes a picture of Corwin and Matilda and develops those and realizes Mrs. Yao is the queen of clubs, and that gives her an idea.
Well, I think she realizes there's another queen.
And there's a moment where Corwin kind of shows off that he's anti-Semitic because she mentions Mrs. Yao's tea shop, the hate crime, and he's like, oh, immediately thinks it's the Jewish kids.
Yep.
And Alice corrects him, is like, no, it wasn't the Jewish kids, it was this other child. And I'm a little bit surprised Alice didn't just straight up say what the note said, because it's the exact opposite of what he thought. But she just, oh no, it's this English child that did it. But if she had said the note says go back to your own country, it would be very clear that it was an English person that did it.
Yeah.
So I was a little surprised by that, but he honestly feels a little bit easily swayed. But they make it to the lecture. It's terrible, and Alice hates it.
Unsurprisingly.
Her aunt's there.
Yeah.
In disguise. She's actually wearing a dress. And at first, Alice is like, oh no.
Excuse me. Does my aunt have a secret life that I didn't know about?
And that I definitely don't agree with. But no, she is in disguise to serve as a secret agent for Willard, who's the Mad Hatter. In this timeline, he's mad because he's a socialist, not because of Mercury yet.
Yeah.
Willard apparently came to one of the meetings and gave the political candidate a hard time, and so he's not allowed at the meetings anymore. And so now Vivian goes. And this is the part where Alice is like, oh, he should run for mayor. She's like, oh.
What an idea.
That might not be a bad idea. The political candidate, Gilbert, walks over. And this dude, I guess it needed to be a little blunt for teenagers. But this dude literally walks up, starts having a conversation with these ladies. And he's already had a xenophobic rant, but starts talking to her and mentions that, oh, she's not married and doesn't have children. And Gilbert's like, yeah, I have laws that I'm going to pass against unwed women.
Uh-huh. Wild.
How are you getting votes?
Yeah, but he is.
And I mean, granted, that's how we feel about modern day candidates sometimes, but it was just the most least tactful thing he could have said in the moment. And he's like, oh, you're an unwed woman? I'm going to make you illegal. Or something like, it's not going to make unwed women illegal. It's just going to make them hard to live a lifestyle, which granted, what are you going to do? They can't have bank accounts.
Yeah, but I did appreciate how pretty immediately Corwin was like, that
makes me uncomfortable.
That's not a good idea. So I do appreciate that
It's Matilda and Corwin.
Yeah, they pulled back.
So outside, there's a bar nearby, and so Alice runs into Katz coming out of this thing, and so he's like, And thankfully, she explains and he's cool about it, but I was worried some mothers would have prolonged that drama, and you're just like, oh my gosh, just communicate.
Oh my gosh, same here. The miscommunication trope, I can't stand it, and I'm so glad they didn't do that.
I mean, they did it right. He's like, and then when they get a chance, Alice is like, so I don't believe in that at all. And he's like, okay, good.
Yeah.
You know, like normal people. And so he gives her a riddle to help.
More riddles.
Girl, you're dense.
Come on.
Cheshire. Anyway, she takes a picture of Vivian and the two partners in the law firm that Katz works at. And Alice is like, ooh, I wonder who all of these people will be. And I immediately thought, well, she's the caterpillar. And you were just in a situation where the caterpillar was next to two other people. Which, by the way, I ended up having 2.5 pages of names.
Yeah.
Not because there weren't a ton of characters, but most of them just weren't named.
No, they were just descriptions of people.
They were just like, oh, it's a newspaper man. It's like, oh, I'm fine with this. I don't have to keep up with this. Which we don't. We never see the newspaper man again.
Nope.
Or the other guy. But it ends up being that they're not the trio planning war. I was surprised by that.
Yeah.
But whatever.
Well, who were the partners?
One of the partners was a Scotty dog. And the other was the March Hare.
thought the March Hare had died.
No, that was the thing. And Alice was like, oh, I guess just because you die in one world doesn't mean your counterpart dies.
Oh, that's right.
Because that's when she comes to terms with the fact that Mary Ann is probably dead.
Yeah, you're right. Okay, that's right.
Because she still exists.
That's an important plot point, too, because of what happens next time she's in Wonderland.
Yes. So, yeah, I was a little surprised by that. But she develops the film. That's when she learns that, oh, there's more than one queen in Wonderland. That's when she learns about the queen of clubs, because Mrs. Yao is the queen of clubs. Does not bring up fades or diamonds.
Yeah.
I mean, they do. And she mentions, oh, maybe another adventure. But
yeah, not this one.
This book isn't going to get a sequel. So
nope.
Do with that what you will. So she tries a bunch of things to try to fall asleep. Oh, and also she realizes that her sister's the dodo.
From that photo.
And she realizes that the personalities very barely cross over. Dodo is amazingly super loyal, and so that actually kind of softens her heart to Matilda a little bit.
I think so, yeah.
To be like, okay, maybe my sister's more loyal than I gave her credit for.
Yeah, maybe I'm overlooking her qualities.
Because she's like, well, she literally is trying to make me happy. It's just, she doesn't have enough of a world view to realize her version of happiness is not happiness for everyone.
Yeah, it was really good perspective taking.
I know. I was so impressed. Teenagers are getting all the empathy lessons. I'm fine with this. And once again, I'm over here like YA should teach lessons, but
I mean, not wrong.
So of the two, she decides to go talk to cats because she was with her sister when she fell asleep the first time, and the second time she fell asleep, she was with cats, and she's like, I don't want to talk to my sister, so let's go talk to cats.
Let's find someone I can fall asleep with.
And I love how in parentheses, you don't get this from the audiobook, in parentheses, it's things like, oh, it totally wasn't for the fact that she wanted to see him, parentheses, it was.
Oh, really?
Or the fact that he might be excited to see her. It was.
That's pretty good. Yeah, I don't recall that from the book.
It was very cute. So she goes to the square to try to find him because it would be scandalous if she went to his workplace. Okay.
We also forget all decorum later and she goes back to his office anyway, so.
Yeah, it's whatever. So she goes to the square, but it works out because she needed to go there because she finds out a bunch of children have been arrested.
In connection with the window?
For the crime, just immediately. The police just showed up and arrested a bunch of children for the crime, despite the fact that they cannot read and write in English. This is sarcastically when I put my note, because all of the speeches by the political Gilbert are basically, we don't have enough racism. We need more of it.
Yep.
And so I sarcastically was like, see, racism is alive and well. We don't need the new mayor to make it more racist. A little salty. I might survive off salt and spite.
Well, you do have to have someone to keep it going, so.
Yeah, so she decides, okay, let's go talk to Katz, because Katz does pro bono work for the families in the square, because imagine that being an immigrant, life is hard.
Yeah.
And so she's going to go to his office to tell him about the kids. When she gets mugged by this random dude, and they play tug of war for her camera, and she ends up grabbing it out of his reach and falling and hitting either the wall or the ground, but she hit something really hard.
Yep.
And she gets knocked out. Which brings her to Wonderland.
Whoa!
We did it.
Unconventional, but it worked.
And so, for some reason, she's at the White Rabbit's house. She goes in the White Rabbit's house, and she sees the dodo. And so eats a cake and makes the cuff bigger so the dodo can get out of the chain. So the dodo explains, doesn't know where the Hatter is, doesn't know where Griffin is. He and Bill were in the house, but the housekeeper helped Bill escape because he used to work there, apparently. And so it's Alice and the dodo. And it's going to be Alice and the dodo for a while.
Yeah, they take up a lot of the book together.
Second question to the author. How did she choose pairings? Because she also ends up with a Hatter for a while. I'm curious. But as she's leaving, she hears someone crying. And so she goes upstairs and she finds that the White Rabbit is crying that Mary Ann is dead. And he explains that he's actually been helping the queen to help get toys to make things end quicker.
Yeah.
And at this point, Alice thinks, oh, end quicker, like the war will end. But he means end quicker, bringing about the end of the world.
Yeah.
Fair enough for her not getting that at this point in time.
No, doesn't make sense.
But he explains the rules of the toys. And it's whoever has the most toys wins. And I, being the creative problem solver that I am, I don't understand why she didn't just make all of her citizens make toys for her. Why did she have to kill all of them?
None of it made sense to me. And this is where I started kind of losing. And I was like, wait. without the explanation of it being a game and all that kind of stuff, I was like, wait, toys? What is happening? This doesn't make any sense. And this is where I have a hard time reconciling. I get that it is Wonderland and that it is supposed to be nonsensical, but it was just too much for me.
She is a toddler throwing a tantrum.
Yeah.
But has adult power.
Well, that is always a problem with a tyrant, right?
Yeah. So Alice and the dodo decide to go to the Queen of Clubs. And I wanted to slap Alice so hard. Cards are coming for them. And the dodo's like, oh no, dance. And so he starts dancing. And then she has to ask 3 times. Why? Why are we dancing? What happened to trusting Wonderland?
Yeah, just do it.
Just do it. The cards are coming. The dodo says dance, you dance. You don't sit there and go, this is nonsense. Alice!
We know it's nonsense. That's the whole point.
Just dance. And so she dances and they get away. Girl.
Yeah.
Trust Wonderland or don't trust Wonderland. So they end up near the Queen of Land and they find out it's a huge game of snakes and ladders.
Yep.
And if they do bad things, the snake is going to make them go back squares. But if they do good things, they can go up the ladder. So it's not just landing on the space, it's how you act. Also, Cheshire shows up again for the fun of it. And he says that there's a very important link about Alice as she travels between the 2 worlds and only brings some of the other with it. And that'll come up later. I actually kind of like how they set that up because the answer to Katz's riddle is perspective.
Yeah.
That's what's so important. And so going into the land of nonsense, she's bringing a perception of reality with her that she can use as a bargaining chip. And then when she goes back to the real world, having a perspective of nonsense, she's able to use that.
It does. It helps. Yeah. There is good setup and takedown in this one.
The answer is you need to travel to get world perspective.
Yep.
I love it. Travel, you get perspective, meet people, talk to them. But yeah, this was 100% the book she wanted to write with Neverland with the, oh, you need to save your world so you can save this world.
Yeah.
Also, he's like, oh, by the way, I mean, not this way. He's not this direct about it, but he's like, oh, by the way, the White Rabbit sent people on the game board. You're not the only players. And so there's this creature called the Bonetalope.
Yeah.
They're antelopes without knees.
The creatures in Wonderland can be creepy.
That uncanny valley, though. So they're about to charge at them, and they can't because you can't go backwards in the game. And so Alice's answer to this is to go down a snake so they can go up a ladder, so they can be the square before the Bontelopes. This works despite the fact that the Bontelopes can go forward.
Doesn't make sense.
So they end up dealing with Toves instead, which that scene, talking about bones and sinews, goodness.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Because they have corkscrew noses and it just is worse. Hi, Liz.
The descriptions are pretty on point. I will give them that. She does a good job really creeping you out.
So she eats a cake and pulls the castle closer to her so they can get there, but Alice ends up knocking out. But she doesn't wake up in England. She's still in Wonderland. Yay! So Alice meets with the queen, and the queen gives them a prize for winning. And I was half expecting, because earlier one of the tricks was, oh, there's a bunch of gold and treasure here, and if you take any of it, it's greed, and so you go down a snake.
Yeah.
And so I thought that was going to be this, but no, Alice just takes one of the things and it's fine. She ends up taking a wristwatch, which is very important for later.
Yes.
I love that the dodo picked a tie pin.
What's a tie? Oh, that's a literal pin that goes on a tie. Yeah.
Yeah. And it says, I think something like #1 winner or something. It's very cute. But up until this point, the Cheshire has been hinting at that the White Rabbit is running towards time. Time with a capital T.
Yeah, I could definitely tell, even with the audiobook, they were talking about time as a personified figure.
So I automatically knew her choosing a wristwatch would come important later. So when she remembers it later, I'm like, thank you.
Thank you for paying this off.
So she asks for the help, and the queen doesn't want to help. And Alice, once again, good lessons on politics. Alice realizes from the queen's perspective, she doesn't want to just attack another queen and dethrone her because what's stopping that from happening to her? And so instead, she gives him an egg and says, if the people rise up against her, then I will help. He's different.
the one thing that makes sense, but then everyone questions.
Yeah. And she's also the one that it's like, oh yeah, no, the queen is trying to end the world. And Alice is like, but I thought she wanted to win. And the Queen of Clubs is like, yeah, that's how you win. And I don't know why Alice, as an 18-year-old, doesn't have the language to be like, but she can't enjoy the win there. Because that's what Alice doesn't understand is, yeah, you won, but you don't get to enjoy it.
Yeah. What's the point of winning at that point?
Yeah. And you think the Queen of Clubs, all of the characters take the world ending very nonchalantly, which I feel like should have tipped Alice off a little bit.
Yeah, they're not actually that concerned.
Because you get to the end of the book, she saves the world, but it's going to end in an hour anyway.
Yeah. They're like, oh yeah, for the next hour. You saved us for an extra hour. Cool. We're like, wait, what?
Why did we stop this? Also, more stolen treats. She just steals food from everyone, and everyone's just fine with that.
Yes, constantly.
There's a moment with the train later on where she thinks about, oh no, I don't have money. I'm going to take this anyway.
Yeah. Oh, well, I'm going to bully this person into giving it to me anyway.
So she goes out the back door, which takes her to the Unlikely, which is where her house is, her London house, but reversed. And a couple Wonderland touches, like the candy dish can run away and there's creatures and whatnot.
Yeah, I did like that. That was fun.
But everywhere that she would hide as a child are other creatures. And so she's wondering how much of her is tied up in Wonderland.
Yeah, like her impact or her essence.
And she's like, is this all in my head? Do I have some sort of connection between the two? Why is my house here? So that's where they find the Hatter.
Yeah, and several of them, right? It was the Hatter, the Dormouse.
Yeah, so it's the Hatter and the Dormouse because the Dormouse is always hanging out with Hatter. But this is where she solves the perspective riddle. She has a mental crisis because of all of this, but she solves the perspective riddle. So we have the Hatter and the Dormouse again, and the Hatter apparently had the last of his nonsense knocked out of him, so he looks like a normal person.
Yeah, and they're like, this is concerning.
Very.
We are not a fan.
And Cheshire shows up again.
Woo! He comes and goes when he wants.
The Cheshire calls her out and she's like, why are you trying to be Marianne? And she's like, I don't know, because the people believe in her. I'm trying my best here. And, you know, the whole time, the point is that Marianne was a creature of Wonderland, and so she used that to her advantage. But Alice needs to use the fact that she's from England to her advantage. You're the same person, but not.
Yeah, no, that's fair.
And I do like how the entire book, Alice kind of struggles with being compared to Marianne.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah, her jealousy for Marianne and that comparison and always thinking that other people are holding her to the same standards when in their reality, they're just like, no, you just seem like you can do something about it.
Yeah, she'll go to the bird village again. And first of all, she pulls out the egg and there's a whole page of dialogue of the random things birds are saying. But she pulls out the egg and she's like, this is from the Queen of Clubs. And people are like, oh my gosh, is she gonna eat it? Humans eat eggs. Did she lay the egg? But one of the things is, I would follow that egg anywhere.
Yeah.
So good. But she goes there and she says, hey, this is the plan. We're going to rise up against the Queen of Hearts so the Queen of Clubs helps us. And they're like, oh, well, if Marianne planned that, we'll do it. And Alice is like,
are you kidding me?
I guess I can't tell you guys that she's dead.
Yep, I'm just going to keep that under wraps.
But that's just another example of her being compared to Marianne. She's just frustrated. So they go through a forest. They meet the card cutter, who is hinted earlier, and apparently is not the executioner.
Ooh, real creepy.
It's a skeleton that tries to keep the game fair, and because Alice is trying to bring in another deck, he's like, you're cheating. And she's like, I am not cheating. But he's like, by the rules, you're cheating.
Yeah, let me tell you, that one gave me the creeps because, again, this is where the audiobook versus the actually reading. The audiobook narrator gave this like a Voldemort-esque, very creepy, appropriately rattly voice. Very strange. Was not a fan.
Which is after the train, which I basically skipped over. Although, the only important thing that happens on the train is she's buying tickets and she turns around. She had a bunch of creatures from the house. And she turns around and only the Mad Hatter's there. And the Hatter's kind of like, oh, they went ahead to tell people. And Alice is like, great, I'm stuck with the Hatter.
Yeah, dang it. Well, and then she meets the Knave again.
And the Knave is like, oh, if we meet again, I'm gonna have to tell the Queen, bye.
Toss me over, please.
This is how you should send me off.
Yeah.
Also, there's a line about saving the world is one thing, but fixing it is another. So good.
Very good.
Also, the train is where he drinks mercury. But we'll skip all of this. This is kind of meh. There's a mole town that decides to to help. And then there's a baby castle that decides not to help.
Yeah.
Although I would argue they are still resisting the queen, but that's beside the point.
Exactly.
They walk down the road and they hide because cards are coming, but not just cards, there are bigger guards. That doesn't come up.
It's just nonsense.
Anyway, back to the bird town and where all of that nonsense was happening. So then they head to the castle. They learn that ants are the ones digging through the rubbish of the towns that are burning.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
To find toys. And they're like, that actually makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
I think that's the first time Alice was like, yeah, that makes sense. This is where you meet the card cutter, like we were talking about. He has half a scissor, which I kind of love. But something ends up happening where the scissor gets stuck in Alice's heart.
Oof.
And the Hatter's like, you need to go back to your world or you're going to die. And she's like, no, I want to stay. Like, you need to go back to your world or you're gonna die.
But she's like, but I won't die in the real world. And he's like, I don't care, leave.
She wakes up again, which I'm happy about. I was worried that at this point they were going to go to the end. I was like, no, what about the kids?
Yeah.
You need to go tell cats. So she wakes up in the alleyway with two of the square children, which is great because make sure she's okay. She finds out that she has everything. She has her money. She has her jewels. She has the glass plates.
Yeah, nothing was taken but her camera.
Photos. She's literally just missing her camera. This dude is an idiot. And granted, Connolly's not the one that mugged her, but the dude couldn't have grabbed some other stuff to make it look like a mugging and not like it was super suspicious.
Yeah.
Granted, Connolly gives away the game, but pretty bad play. He's not good at this. So Connie takes her home, and the police, of course, are racist, and they try to arrest the children, even though she's like, no, tiny children did not mug me. Where would they hide the camera? And so Connie walks her to her aunt's because it's quote unquote closer.
Yeah.
But actually she wants to develop all of the stuff that she has. And when she gets to the door, she turns around because Connie's like, oh my gosh, your camera was stolen. I saw someone laying on the ground and it went for the police. I didn't realize it was you. They stole your camera. And she gets to her aunt's house, turns around and says, I didn't say my camera was stolen, and shuts the door. And I was like,
ooh.
Oh my gosh.
Got him.
That's my girl. Yes. I didn't catch that. It was so good. I was so proud of her. That's a smart protagonist.
Yep. That's her actually going at it the way it needs to go.
Oh, it was so good and so satisfying of it coming together. And you're like, oh my gosh, he did it. Oh, I was so proud of her.
Yeah, she did a great job. She has her moments for sure.
So she develops all the plates. None of them seem to be the thing that they're after, but eventually she realizes that, I wonder if it's about the rock being thrown through the window.
Of course it was. Who would have known that was on my camera?
Yeah. This is the part where even Alice is like, this was a dumb plan. He literally just took the camera and left all the other plates and thought that whatever's in the camera was that one shot that she took 2 days ago at this point. Yesterday? I don't know. Time's weird.
Yeah, who knows?
Literally all that was in there was a bluebird.
Lucky for her.
They're dumb. They're bad at this. But with Aunt Vivian's help, she realizes that Coney wrote the note for the window. So total criminal. And Vivian immediately wants her to go to the newspaper, even though they make it clear that she can't see what's written on the note. And so I was a little confused that Alice didn't try to blow that up as well, or go back to Mrs. Yao and take a picture of, I mean, she doesn't have her camera at this point, so she can't.
No.
But have someone else bring the rock to show the newspaper so they can take a picture. Anyway, it works out. The newspaper ends up blowing it up themselves.
Yeah.
Okay, fine. Anyway, Willard walks in and he's running for mayor and he's going to enforce socialist issues. And Vivian's like, maybe don't.
Yeah, you don't have to.
We don't need to be a radical here if you actually want to win. Once again, a great politician lesson.
Coming from the non-politicians.
Yeah. So Vivian and Willard are going to go to a place and talk about their plans for him to become mayor. And so Alice joins them on her way to the newspaper. And while there's a park or something on the way, a square. And Gilbert has a bunch of people, balloons, pens, all this stuff happening. And they meet the other mayor candidate, Mallory.
Yeah.
And he's just like, I really just want to redo the sewer system. Which in that time period, 100%.
Yeah, that is his entire platform. Let's just redo the sewer system.
The Thames is disgusting. Yes, do it. But that was me as an adult. This dude has my vote. 100%. Redo the sewer systems. Disgusting. And he wants to do rezoning of the factory stuff because he thinks that's causing issues with air pollution, basically.
Yeah.
And yes, you are correct. London is disgusting.
Especially at this day and age. My goodness.
So this is the part where Alice thinks that she needs to go talk to Katz. And so she talks to Katz and she's like, you need to give the photo to the newspaper because you're a dude. And he's like, but everyone knows Alice because this is not London. This is Kexford. This is like a town.
Yeah, small little town.
So everyone knows everyone. He's like, they probably accept it because you're Alice. But he ends up doing it for her because he's like, okay, I'll handle the real world stuff. You need to get to Wonderland.
Yeah, you got to get back. And then she's like,
What?
What? Come on, my girl.
And he opens a door, it has a mirror, and it looks like a funhouse mirror. And he's like, yeah, one day I'll own a real mirror. And then he angles it towards her, and then it shows Wonderland. And she's like, wait a second.
Whoa.
And she's like, I need to get your picture. He's like, you know who I am.
Yeah, it's been pretty obvious this whole time.
It's been hinted at that the Cheshire Cat can come to the real world. Cat seems to know a lot about everything. And you come to find out, like, they talk.
Yeah, they are not each other, because that's where I was getting skeeved out at initially when they made the connection, because I was like, oh no, she can't be romantic with the Cheshire Cat. That's weird. No, they are just two separate people who happen to be connected.
Yes. So she ends up going through the looking glass.
Hey.
Cute. I appreciate.
Now, I will say, this is the first time where, like you said, so Neverland versus Wonderland. Neverland, you physically go from one place to the other. Like, it is a physical realm. But Wonderland, she's always gotten there by sleeping. And so this is the first time where I feel like that calls into question what does happen with her physical body when she's in Wonderland. Because the implication has always been that she's just sitting there sleeping. But this time, she actually goes through the looking glass. So, I don't know. We don't know.
First book versus second book.
Fair.
The lore changed. Anyway, so she comes in and the Queen of Hearts and the Queen of Clubs are playing war. I was half expecting that the cards would actually be playing war.
Yeah, laying down on top of themselves.
Because there is a moment where she's like, surprise attack! And then one of the cards lays down and it's a 9.
Mm-hmm.
Which I kind of love a person that they're having a serious conversation between Alice and the Queen of Hearts. And then the Queen of Clubs like, surprise attack!
Yeah, that would have been pretty good.
Oh, it's so funny. Anyway, so Alice is about to attack the Queen as she's like floating down because Underworld.
Yeah.
I so appreciate that Liz kept that up. And so she's about to attack the Queen of Hearts. And the Griffin stops her and he's like, hey, getting both of yourselves killed will not solve this. But also, you killing her and getting a light scratching will also not solve this. So quitting the Queen of Hearts is not going to solve this. So they're just watching the nonsense of the war happening. And she learns that the White Rabbit has already gone to the clock against the Queen's orders because the Queen doesn't think she has enough toys yet.
How?
Who is she? I mean, and I'm about to say, who is she comparing herself to? But there is a point in the book where they point out there's this random guy that's been collecting toys for forever. Just go steal his toys.
Yep.
Too logical, I know.
It would be.
So Alice is like, how do I get there? And then they're like, oh, you have to do this and 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 this. And she's like, that's stupid. Anyway, let me use my Deus Machina paddles to create a portal.
Because now I'm realizing it is my perspective.
I do I call it Deus Ex Machina powers.
Yeah.
But there are rules that she adheres to with it. It is all perspective based.
They just have to get to the point where they explain that to you.
It doesn't feel like cheating. It feels like that's right for Wonderland.
Yeah.
So goes in. The tower looks like Tower of London and Big Ben, but Big Ben going to 13 instead of 12. And so Alice and the rabbit race there, but he gets there first and he pushes it to 13 and Alice can't make it go back, but she can stop her wristwatch. And that stops time completely. And if she moves the second hand back, she can't move anything else.
Yeah.
She physically goes back in time. So as far as she can go is entering the portal into this timeland.
Yeah.
And so she can't go back before then. And she comes to find out she can't walk too far away from the starting point. She can give herself a little bit of an edge, but she can't go close enough to the rabbit to tie him up or give her a huge head start, walk to the tower.
Yeah. So some rules. I did appreciate the rules.
She starts trying to capture the rabbit. First of all, she stands in front of him and is going to capture him. Then she makes traps. And then it hints that she's been doing this over and over and over and over and over again. She keeps getting injured.
Yeah.
And then she realizes, and I thought this was good because it's a puzzle ending and not a combat ending. But, okay, this is where it got me. Alice realizes, I don't need to catch the rabbit. I need to make it to the tower first.
Yeah.
Is that not what you've been doing, girl? Have you literally just been focusing on I need to catch the white rabbit and everything's fine? Because I thought you were trying to get him in traps to give yourself an advantage.
No, I think it was traps because he's a rabbit, right? He's easily maneuverable and stuff. And so she needed to be able to slow him down so she could catch him and prevent him from doing that. But then she's like, oh, wait, perspective. I just need to get to the tower first and then I'll be able to prevent him from doing the thing.
Yeah. So she does. She gets there first this time around, and the rabbit kind of gives up and just admits he wanted a new game to begin so he can be with Marianne again.
Yeah.
So sad.
I know.
She literally is holding him and he's crying.
I know, poor little rabbit. But yeah, and this is where I was just like, all of it coming to the end, because I don't know if maybe I had drifted off at the Queen of Clubs part or whatever, but the idea that this was all a game, that Wonderland is a game on a timer, I was just like, you're kidding me. This is it. This is what's been going on. I don't know, it felt very anticlimactic to me.
See, I felt like it was very natural because of things like, I mean, you didn't get the war one, but like Snakes and Ladders, and there were a couple of other games that came up, none as blatant as the Snake and Ladders game.
That's fair, yeah.
But there were a bunch of them that would be mentioned or that they would do and whatever.
Yeah, that's fair.
So a crown appears on Alice's head, the Queen of Hearts is captured, and she's like, okay, we've saved the world. And except they haven't.
They're like, yep, you gave us an extra hour.
And so they have an hour and she just embraces it and she's like, fine, I declare tea time and nonsense until the world ends. So they do.
And that's the end of Wonderland.
Yeah. And she's sad. She's like, can I come back? Will my friends know me? And all this stuff.
They're like, we don't really know.
And you find out in the epilogue, she does come back. You don't know if her friends know her or not, but Katz is like, who could forget an Alice?
Yeah.
So I like to think they would remember her. But she wakes up at home and she's like, cool, I fixed that world. I need to fix this world.
Yes.
Matilda comes up to her and she's like, hey, me and Corwin aren't for that one guy anymore. And we're definitely not friends with Conley anymore because he's a literal criminal. Maybe we should not. And so instead of going to this big rally that's going on, she and her parents are going to go for a carriage ride in the country. And I'm so sad we don't get more of the parents. We kind of get the mom in like 3 or 4 scenes.
Yeah.
And we get the dad in 2. But at the end,
they seems like a lot of fun.
the dad is on some nonsense.
Yeah.
Because he has a scarf with the coins on it.
Which someone obviously gave him.
And he was tying it around his head. He's like, I was so excited to use this.
Yeah. He would have had a great time.
We see where Alice got it, but it's like, oh, we could have had some more of him. Anyway, also, I felt a little bad for Matilda. Matilda tells Alice that Corwin's going to come over with a present as an apology. And she's like, it's going to be ugly, but just accept it.
Just try, please.
And she's like, okay. And Alice keeps mentioning these gloves that she thinks are really ugly that Matilda keeps wearing. And I think the implication is Corwin gave her the gloves.
Maybe, yeah. And that they were going to get the same.
And Matilda was just warning her, like, oh, it's going to be ugly. But it turns out to be top of the line camera.
Yeah, a camera. And she's like, okay, he's all right.
I'm going to have to put up with him for family dinners. But he's not the worst.
He's not the worst.
I could have a worse brother-in-law for sure. First of all, I was like, okay, cool. He's got coin. Matilda's going to be set. But also I felt a little bad for Matilda because her getting ugly gloves.
Yeah, but she appears to like them. Matilda does.
I think her warning Alice is she doesn't like them. She wears them because Corwin got it for her.
Yeah, maybe.
I think she also knows they're ugly. But anyway, so Alice decides that if the nonsense world needs logic, the logical world needs nonsense.
Yeah.
And I have so many thoughts of whether this would work in real life or not. They basically make fun of the candidate. They have clowns come out and act like Gilbert and his twin. And they're like, oh no, we need to save England. England needs to be saved. We need to arrest all the children. And the children come out and they give people flowers and candy to show their kids, calm down.
Yeah.
And they're like, no, get the foreigners, and run around and try to get them. And clowns come out, and Vivian does the clown stilts and points out his weird sexism of better a widow than to live a woman.
Yep.
A bunch of nonsense happens. It takes the wind out of his sails. And in the epilogue, they point out that it brings to light, hey, what are you doing? Maybe we should think about all of this extremism.
I did, and I can't remember where it came up, but I did appreciate at one point, like you said, I think it's when she's talking to Katz or whatever, and he's pointing out that he is an immigrant and all that kind of stuff. And she's like, well, who did you vote for in the last election? And he's like, I see what you did there because you didn't get to vote.
Yeah, because he kind of tries to check her.
Yeah.
For having white privilege.
Yeah.
You're a citizen. You have it easier than we do. And she's like, so who did you vote for in the last election? And he's like,
Oh, I see. Yes, you're right.
Male privilege. I see here. And I do like, he challenges people because you can definitely tell, first of all, he's a lawyer. Surprise to no one.
Nope.
That he likes verbal sparring. But he calls her out for stuff, and then she kind of checks him, and he's like, fair. I concede my point.
They're very good, like you said, intellectual equals for each other.
Yeah, it's very good. And I appreciate Alice gets annoyed and is like, hey, I'm going to tell you how it is. But she doesn't get offended.
Yeah.
That he has those beliefs.
No.
Because she kind of gets it. That people absolutely do that. But anyway, epilogue. I like who won mayor.
Yeah, I thought that was a good middle ground.
Because Willard is absolutely an extremist. He would be an extremist in America present day.
Yeah.
He'd be a little Bernie Sanders running around. But for that time period, and he's literally preaching socialism. So you have that extreme. And then you have the other extreme of Gilbert.
Yeah.
Being like, close the borders, kick them out, da-da-da-da-da. And so Mallory wins.
And you're like, nope, it's the man who wants to deal with the sewers. Yes.
And then there's oh my gosh, my heart. Then there's a bunch of racist people who are like, put the children at the square, and takes them to the square to be like, look at them, the terrible things.
Yeah, look at what they're doing.
And he watches them, and they're playing marbles, and he just watches it, and he's like,
you're playing the game wrong.
No. This is not how we play marbles. Let me show you how I did it when I was a child. And I love that little slip in of nonsense in the real world of a game bringing people together.
Yeah.
Oh, symbolism is so pretty.
It was good.
Clap. Alice and Katz get married and have kids. Katz becomes a full partner, and Alice gets to be a famous photographer, and she's involved with the Dadaist movement.
Well, I don't know what that is.
Okay, it's an early 20th century art movement.
Oh, okay.
So think kind of abstract art. It does perspective a lot. One of the most famous examples of Dadaism, and one that I studied. Think about the melting clocks painting.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So that's Dadaism. There was a dude that took a urinal and wrote on the side of it and submitted that to an art museum.
Oh, wow.
That one's a famous example, but it's basically taking the everyday and breaking it into uncanny valley, like eyeballs being too big, things coming out of people's mouths.
Okay.
Weird perspectives, so you only see like half a face when you're supposed to see a full one. It's not Picasso.
Mm-hmm.
But if you took his Cubism arts a little further, then you would have Dadaism.
Okay, interesting.
So yes, it totally makes sense to me that she would be a part of that because Wonderland.
Yeah, no, that does make sense.
But yeah, it was one of the forms of abstract art in the early 20th century because you have photographs now, because up until that point, the realism was very important. You'd have still lifes, you'd have portraits, you have things like that. And then the camera came out, and so that caused a crisis of, well, what is painting then? What is this art form? And so you see just a huge spread of this avant-garde abstract art to, in a sense, reclaim the difference between painting and photographs.
Got you. Yeah, I just Googled it. I see what you mean. That's neat.
Yeah.
It does make sense.
So yeah. And then at the very end, Alice leans against a mirror and goes back to Wonderland. We don't get to see her going to Wonderland. We just know that she did.
No, yeah, she's telling one of her kids a story.
No, she's telling a kitten a story.
Oh, she's telling the kitten the story. I think she's pregnant. That's what it is. Yeah. And so she's telling this kitten a story, and she was like, oh yes, this is what it would look like if this is what was happening. And then all of a sudden it starts happening and she gets to go. And you're like, and pregnant Alice in Wonderland. Okay. That would be an interesting follow-up.
So yeah, General thoughts. Just because I've cataloged the change, we're back to chapter numbers. Granted, there's only one perspective, but I feel like all of Liz's have been chapter names or the perspective. So this is the first time she's ever used chapter numbers. Because the first time we saw chapter numbers in this whole series was Milan.
Oh, really? I cannot even remember in all of the books.
I care way too much about this. It's just the consistency that rocks my mind. It's different every single book, which is crazy because normally a series is the same. You never know what to expect. This is the first time I've physically read one of Liz's books. And so the Kindle version has the author bio, but I usually okay, I'm done with the book, return it.
Yeah.
But I had a chance to look at her author bio. It's cute.
Really?
She talks about how she got her bachelor's in Egyptology and then she spent 10 years writing video games. That's pretty cool. And then she talks about how when she originally started publishing work, she used a pen name.
Oh.
And then eventually for the Chloe series, she used her real name. Instead of being like, I felt confident enough to actually use my real name, she said, because all of the assassins that were after her were dead.
Oh my gosh. What? That's pretty crazy.
It's so cute. As much of a hard time as we give her,
yeah,
we have wanted to like Liz Braswell since the beginning.
And she's the OG.
The missteps and maybe the resetting of Jin Kalanita helped, but this is the book we have known she could have written since the beginning. And it's just, this is the first book that is not an Elizabeth Lim book that I gave 5 stars.
Really?
I am down for it. And I'm just so happy for her. I hope whatever stars aligned for this will align in her next book because it's Tangled and you love Tangled.
I know. I'm so nervous.
I'm hopeful for you because this was pretty good.
I don't know. I gave it a 3. Whether or not it was just the perspective of the week that I've been having or just trying to, like you said, both of us, we really finished it rapidly fast. It just was so, I don't know, not my style of book, I guess. I think Wonderland works better, I guess, on a screen than it does on a page because the nonsense is so hard for my very logical brain to follow. I love Alice herself as a character and as a person because she's so logical and I feel like she's very much like me. And so I definitely empathize with her struggle throughout the book. So I guess if I back out of my own nonsense and look at it from the perspective of what you're doing, I've worked for Liz because she could drop the plot lines or the things didn't have to make sense and all that kind of stuff. I'm like, okay, no, you're right. It was better than I thought. But my rating for it, chasing a wild rabbit out of 10, because that's what I felt like my brain was doing constantly, chasing a rabbit in a zigzag pattern. And I don't like that.
I gave it learning a new game out of 10. It had a period where you had to get used to the rules of Wonderland, which is kind of what we did, where you learn, oh, everything's a game. All the people are like this. This is how you negotiate with nonsense. But I had a fun time. Once I got past that, I had a fun time.
Yeah, well, that's good.
One question for the author. Where in the world did she get time to write a 500 plus page book?
Yeah.
And edit it to the point that it's good? Because this is the woman that, poor thing, got burned out with the first 3. And now she is doing every other book. And so she wrote Neverland, Straight On Till Morning, which was like 300 pages. And then we had Elizabeth Lim, Cinderella. And once again, all 3 of these books came out the same year.
Yeah.
So there was no way she wasn't writing this the year before or whatever, maybe even like up to the deadline.
Yeah.
Like, where did she have the time to come up with 500 pages of a book and it be good?
And I don't know. And that, I feel like, ties into my question of why didn't you write this one first? Obviously, this is so up your alley. You did a good job with this one. Why didn't you do this one first? Because like you said, history and Egyptology, but Aladdin isn't Egypt. Nothing has made a connection since up until now.
Yeah.
So that was my question. Like, why didn't you just write this one first?
Maybe even second, but I don't know. Maybe popularity because Maleficent's so popular, so that one was the second. I don't know. I do not know. I have so many questions, not for the authors. I mean, a little for the authors because, hey, what does your contract say?
Oh, yes.
What is your perspective of things? But I have questions for the editors. I have some very big questions for the editors. I want to know that publishing schedule.
Yep.
I want to know that editing schedule. I want to know the Disney edits because there were Disney edits.
Oh, yeah.
It took so long for Kingdom Hearts 3 to come out, of part because Disney was so dang picky.
Yeah.
Anyway, just questions.
Yeah, a ton.
Read again. Yeah, shockingly. I would buy this one. I would buy this one to read again at a leisurely pace for fun and not in 3 days.
Yeah, no, not for me. I do own it. And I'm like, well, this is just going to take up space in my Kindle library. So if you ever want to listen to it on an audiobook, I can loan it to you on Kindle, I guess. Because I do want you to experience the narrators.
At least the card cutter voice.
Oh, yeah, that was wild. That was just terrifying.
That's so much fun. Favorite of the series so far?
Still Cinderella.
My brain is telling me Cinderella. If I had to pick up a book right now, I would pick up Cinderella. I still love Mulan. It's really close.
Yeah.
But Cinderella was such a chill read, like a comfort read.
Yes.
Versus Mulan, where it was like, oh, mythology and learning and actively participating, where I felt like Cinderella was more of a comfort read. Like you could read whenever and just enjoy it. So I think Cinderella is pulling ahead in my brain.
Yeah, same here. It was good. I enjoyed it.
But have you read this book? Should more of the twisted tales be after the events of the movie, like this one? It was definitely a change of structure.
Yeah, I do like knowing what comes later.
Do you have any book recommendations for us? Tell us all about it in the comments below. If you like the video, hit like, and if you're enjoying yourself, hit subscribe for more. Thank you for exploring Unbirthday with us. Join us next time when we'll be covering The Gladiator by Harry Turtledove. I'm Sam Reiner.
And I'm Caitlin.
And we hope to see you and a friend here next time. Escape With Me Book Club is a Lunar Skulk production. Check us out on TikTok or Instagram to keep up to date with us. Lunar_SKULK.